The biggest story in the world today is, of course, the crisis in Iran, where the Americans are being held hostage under threat, even of death perhaps, by the Ayatollah's people in Tehran. Well, whether it will be settled might well depend on when the Shah is well enough to be moved out of the United States and remove that particular irritation from the Ayatollah. Vancouver plays an important part in this. Here is Dr. Joachim Burhenny of the General Hospital, who's just back last night from New York Cornell Medical Center, where he performed his procedure to remove the Shah's gallstone. And he was interviewed by my reporter, Brian Coxford.
Perhaps you could explain to us just briefly the method used on the Shah.
Well, the same method I've used for years. It's going through the track that is left from the T-tube to get the stone out.
And the operation was performed on Monday?
It's not an operation, it's a procedure. I did it Monday night together with the physicians at the New York hospital.
And how's the Shah now?
Well, you will read all of that in the newspaper. I mean, all the statements from the New York hospital are quite correct and very good.
Does it sound likely, or are you in a position to say, might he be in a position to be moved?
Well, he has the stone out now, and there'll be a statement today from the New York hospital that the tube will be removed within a day or two, and if there are no complications, or if he feels fine, he could be moved within the next days, 2, 3, 4, 5 days.
Did you get any indication of that?
They won't tell anyone, and they would be foolish if they would.
How did you get involved in it, Doctor?
Well, this is the technique that I designed, so in this particular case, it helped avoid surgery, and that was the easiest way to do it, so they consulted me, and I was willing to go, and that was it.
Was that consultations that took place over the weekend?
No, that consultation happened 4 weeks ago, because we wait 5 weeks after surgery until we attempt it by this method. See, otherwise they have to go back to surgery.
So 4 weeks ago, you were, I guess, sort of on a standby basis to see what was going to happen in the 5 weeks?
No, I told them that I was willing to go. If there's a patient that needs help, I'm willing to go, independent of what the other situation is. And I knew at that time it would take that long.
And it was successful, eh?
Oh, yes, it's all out.
What was the atmosphere around the hospital?
Oh, my goodness, so much security. But I'd rather go home. It's New York time, it's 1:30.
Okay, just the Shah is okay, though?
Oh, he's okay. He's, all what you read about him is correct in the papers about his condition.
What kind of a man?
Well, I'll let you go. Okay, bye-bye.
My thanks to Brian Coxford and Dr. Joachim Burhenny and his wife Linda, who met him at the airport last night after what must have been, to say the least, a strenuous experience. And they had to call a Vancouver doctor to do the Burhenny procedure on the Shah of Iran. That's our spot news this morning. Now we get down to business. Whether or not it's going to be a confrontation, I'm not quite sure. Yesterday we ran a simple story on the WCB inspection procedure in the logging and in the sawmill industry. There is, of course, and always has been, great concern about industrial fatalities, especially in the logging and sawmill industry. BC Federation of Labour has asked for the resignation of Adam Little, the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board. One of the people very outspoken about the Compensation Board is Jack Munro, who is with me this morning, the president of the International Woodworkers of America. And also here to tackle the problem with me and with Jack Munro is Don Lanskail, who is the president and chief executive officer of the Council of Forest Industries. First time I've had these two heavyweights on a program together. They're not, thank goodness, negotiating wages. They're going to discuss what's right and what's wrong, a matter of great interest to many people, with the Workers' Compensation Board of British Columbia, after this break.
About the same as you.
Yeah, I can hear that. Yeah. I just want to cheer you up. Judy Lamarche has cancer. Workers' compensation has been around a long time. And roughly speaking, workers' compensation is the employer-financed scheme run by a government system whereby the injured employer, generally speaking, gives up his right to sue an employer for negligence or whatever, and an arbitration system, or the board system, decides payment for wages lost, pensions, partial pensions, or commutation of pensions. 20 years ago, I think it can be said without fear of contradiction, the compensation board system in British Columbia was in a complete mess. And there was a lengthy royal commission, after which the whole system was reshaped. For a number of years, the action on the compensation board front has been reasonably quiet. Just recently, however, it's been blowing up a storm. And if you take the public statements of both Mr. Lanskail and Mr. Munro, Munro for the I.W.A, Lanskail for the forest industry, you begin to wonder if we're back in the stage again where political confrontation over the WCB procedures is on its way. And I think, gentlemen, that perhaps I should give Mr. Munro the first kick at the cat this morning to lay down from your union point of view, in which, and of course you're very involved in this because your industry takes the highest number of individual fatalities, I do believe, throughout all industry in British Columbia. And perhaps you could spell out for me what your basic concerns are with a system which until recent months or years has been going along without much complaint from you or the public.
Well, Jack, the WCB under the Barrett administration with Terry Eisen heading up as chairman of the Workmen's Compensation Board made a number of significant changes from the old line philosophies of old Wacky Bennett's administration. The employers during that time objected. They didn't want these changes because changes cost money.
And they pay the shot.
And they pay the shot, as they rightfully should. I think we all agree that there should be a WCB that gets away from all this litigation. When the social credit government was returned to power in 1975, 5 pretty significant employers groups, including the Council of Forest Industry, the Chamber of Commerce, the Employers Council, the Board of Trade, wrote a very lengthy letter saying that they wanted their auditor appointed that they have chosen from California who would be unbiased. In effect, they were saying the WCB's auditors were biased, and I don't believe that. Auditors are professional people. That started the mess. It got into a confrontation with the minister, and consequently, one of the first acts that Alan Williams did as Minister of Labor fired Terry Eisen. We were upset that a brand new government, a brand new minister, would not, first of all, not talk to Terry Eisen, would not talk to the trade union movement. Arbitrarily fired him without a meeting, without a telephone call, or whatever. That's when the problems really started. The 2 existing commissioners continued to run the board without a chairman for a period of time, and a bad situation got terrible. The I.W.A. at that point in time wrote a substantial, detailed brief demanding that those 2 commissioners be removed. Those 2 commissioners were removed. Consequently, Terry Eisen and the present 2 commissioners were appointed as the chairman and the commissioners to run the board.
You mean Terry Eisen, or do you mean the new man?
I'm sorry, Adam Little.
Dr. Little.
I want to say at this point in time that I don't know Adam Little, but I understand that Adam Little is a fine person, as persons go. Our complaint now is that we've waited a couple of years to see how this new administration was going to treat our workers and how they were going to run the Workmen's Compensation Board. The I.W.A. has not come out and called for Terry Eisen's resignation.
Adam Little's resignation.
Adam Little's resignation, I'm sorry.
The BC Federation of Labor has.
The BC Federation of Labor has, and I spoke on that resolution. What the I.W.A. has said, that if this administration, which includes not only Adam Little, the commissioners, and senior management, and I really blame senior management, that if that group of people owes every worker in this province a commitment to decent, fair-minded administration of the Workers' Compensation Act. And if they're not prepared to do this, then Adam Little, as the chairman, because he is accepting bad advice and doesn't know that he's accepting bad advice, should resign.
Just a minute, though. You make a much more basic point than that. And correct me if I'm wrong as I put this to Mr. Lanskail. The implication of Jack Munro's statement right now is that when the NDP was defeated and when social credit took power under Bill Bennett, that your people, the Chamber of Commerce, the Employers' Council, Council of Forest Industries, the Canadian Manufacturers Association, etc., exerted pressure to tighten up on what had been a more generous operation of the regulations, the pensions, etc., under the NDP. Is that true?
That is true, Jack. We felt, I was not involved with the council at that time. I was on the other side of the industry in labor relations, as Jack knows. But the industry felt the balance had been tilted too far in one direction, and representations were made to try to improve the administration. Now, I want to clear up 2 points right at the very beginning here. First of all, in answer to your question at the beginning, we are not going to have any confrontation here this morning with Jack. It's no time for acrimonious debate, I don't think, about a question of safety. And the industry is just as concerned about the health and safety of its employees as anybody, including Jack Munro and the I.W.A. Now, there are two aspects to this whole problem, Jack. First of all is the matter of accident prevention. In other words, preventing the situation where you have to have compensation in the first place. And secondly, there is the administration of the compensation system. Now, the two are completely different. In the first area, there should be total cooperation between the board, the union, and the
Isn't there
industry.
total cooperation?
In one area, and I want to deal with that when I have the opportunity, in one area there is not the level of cooperation that we would like to see, and that in my view would very much improve the performance of accident prevention in the forest industry. We are in a very dangerous, hazardous industry, that is admitted. But there are measures that could be taken, I think, to improve, and the employers are keenly interested and concerned about doing that.
What interests me is that when I put the question to you about your approach to social credit, are you happy with the changes that you may have achieved by lobbying the government to say the NDP was too generous? Things were a little bit too much in favor of the worker. In what way have you managed to tilt it away from the NDP leaning towards the worker?
The employers were not satisfied with the administration of the board. They were not satisfied with Mr. Eisen, and the government felt in their wisdom that Mr. Eisen should be removed and a new chairman. Now, another thing, Jack, I'm not here to defend the compensation board here this morning. Adam Little is going to be on tomorrow, and I'm sure that he can defend himself. So my role here is not to defend the board. We are concerned about many aspects of the board too. We're not wholly supportive of the board. We support the system and the principle, and we want to make sure that employees who are unfortunately injured in the forest industry are properly looked after. But there's a balance that has to be maintained and proper controls applied.
Yeah, but for instance, the number of inspections have gone down greatly. Was that as a result of your lobbying of the system?
Absolutely.
Were there too many inspections
Absolutely
before?
not, Jack. And this matter of the number of inspections going down, the board, as I understand it, changed their policy, and instead of having somebody go in to inspect the first aid facility and another one to go in and to inspect the general working routine and the equipment and so on in the plant, decided to have one man do both. And I think this accounts in very large measure for the decrease in the number of inspections.
You mean they've cut out unnecessary inspections?
Exactly.
Just to get back to that one basic point again, Jack Munro said, and you can talk across if you wish at any time, Mr. Munro, Mr. Lanskail, that you had asked for I think he said, your firm of auditors to move in because you weren't happy with some aspects of the financial control of the board.
There was no proper cost control at all.
Did you get that?
There was some, I think there was some improvement,
Did you get your auditing firm in?
No.
You didn't?
No.
But you managed to tighten them up on their cost control.
I think the present administration of the board is doing better. I think there is still room for improvement. Now, there is a difference, Jack, and here again, I want to emphasize that there's a difference between the cost of administering the board and the level of benefits paid to injured employees. And there's been no cutback in the level of compensation paid to employees. As a matter of fact, I have the figures here, and British Columbia is well ahead of Alberta, oil-rich Alberta, and well ahead of Ontario, which is the chief industrial province.
Agreed, Jack?
in
Benefits paid, as such, on a statutory basis, are the best in Canada, are ahead of Alberta?
Well, Jack, they should be. Alberta is basically unorganized and bad wages. They continuously elect right-wing governments who don't give a damn about workers, quite frankly. And Alberta is not a good comparison. The wage rates.
Well, what about Ontario?
There's a couple of dollars difference in wage rates, but I don't want to get lost in the shuffle here. We're going pretty fast. Going back to the Barrett administration and Terry Eisen, the costs went up, and they went up because the board did some good things. The board made some statutory changes. For example, prior to Eisen, if you were on a full disability pension in 1940, in 1974, you were still getting the same pension, which was nothing. Eisen adjusted the pensions twice a year. And
he brought the old pensions up to current standards, more or less, didn't he?
Right.
I want to give you the figures here before Jack digresses here too much. Alberta, the weekly payments are $263. In Ontario, and I'm sure that Jack will not argue that Ontario is not a high wage area of Canada, the level is $233, and in British Columbia, the level is $278 a week. Now, that is a significant increase over those other two provinces.
Hey, what wages are you talking about?
We're talking about the compensation per week for injured employees.
BC has got to do something right. We don't have to
You
be...
mean if I'm on full compensation, what do I get? $278 a week?
$278 a week.
And in Alberta, I get $263, and in Ontario, I get $233. But of course, the question is much broader than that. We'll just get into it now with Don Lanskail, Council of Forest Industries, and Jack Munro of the I.W.A. after this break.
You better do the whole
I'll come straight back to any other points that Jack Munro wants to have at. Don Lanskail has set his terms of reference quite properly, as some things about the board he's not happy with, but by and large he's not here to fight the details of the regulations. But you did say, and I want this to go straight to Jack Munro, you are accused, Jack Munro, of non-cooperation in certain areas of safety, which obviously is going to increase the cost and the problems of the injured worker. Now, gentlemen, do have at it.
Jack, I was in the middle of making a point, and I want to continue to make that point. Under Eisen, the first thing they did, or one of the first things they did, was the pensions that I talked about, cost-price indexing. They liberalized the claims policy. They increased the staff, particularly the resource staff, on accident prevention, on industrial hygiene. The employees that work for the WCB were unionized. That administration established external boards of review. All of these things consequently cost more money, and the employers wanted to get rid of Eisen, and they were successful.
But did they get rid of any of the things that Eisen and Barrett brought in?
Just recently, there was a conference where one of the management people got up and said that they appreciate the WCB in liberalizing the stringent rules as far as allowing workers to return to work when they were not recovered. In other words, walking wounded. Everybody, all management people there agreed with that statement. A guy from the board, the person, the head of the claims department, get up and said, well, we haven't really made any changes, and then led the snickering. Now, I don't know, Don says he doesn't want to get into a confrontation. I guess it takes two to make a confrontation in most instances. In this instance, I'll have a confrontation by myself if necessary. Don Lanskail, the president of the Council of Forest Industries, in last night's Vancouver Sun, accused us of being careless, in effect, going to work to get hurt. And that statement is stupid, it's irresponsible, it's asinine, and it is not the position of the industry. What does cooperation mean? Cooperation, to me, means that we work together to cut down on the accidents. Cooperation to other people obviously means that we say nothing about the fact that inspections are off by 20%, that orders are down by 50%, that there are a hell of a lot less people getting retrained. That we're not going to accept that if that's what cooperation means. The people that are advising Eisen are giving, or Adam Little, the people that are advising him are giving him bad advice, and our members are getting hurt and they're getting killed. And God damn it, we're fed up with it.
Mr.
Jack,
Lanskail.
there are three areas of causes of accidents. One is unsafe conditions, improper equipment, lack of safety devices, guardrails, screens, and so on. And this is generally, we concede, the responsibility of the employer. The second area of cause is unsafe acts by the employee himself. And this is generally, and as a matter of fact always, the responsibility of the individual employee, subject of course to training, and I know Jack makes a point of that, training and instructions. Now it is generally accepted, the Canada Safety Council has said that about 85% of all accidents have a strong element of unsafe acts or sometimes carelessness, failure to comply with instructions on the part of the individual employee. So this is the area that must be tackled if we are going to improve the area of safety performance. The other area, of course, is an act of God where, you know, a lightning strike or something. Now that accounts for a minority, but that's something beyond reasonable human control.
But did you or did you not?
Now, just a minute now, wait till I come to that. So I said that we are not getting the cooperation of the union with regard to the necessary disciplinary actions to make sure that employees follow safety rules and instructions. Now, the record proves the point that I'm making, Jack. Sometimes it's necessary to give warnings to employees, some cases suspension, some cases discharge. If a person consistently performs unsafe acts and endangers not only himself but his fellow workmen. And over the years, when the employer has tried to impose discipline, the local unions of Jack's union, the I.W.A, have consistently opposed and grieved, in some cases wildcatted, in order to prevent the employer imposing reasonable discipline to make sure that safety rules are followed. Now, in addition to that, and just to prove the point I'm making, over the years, and I dug this out yesterday afternoon, I've got 12 arbitration cases where the union has taken an employer action to discipline an employee for a safety infraction, a series of safety infractions in most cases. They've taken 12 arbitration cases right up to arbitration. Now, for every arbitration case, there are probably dozens of other examples that don't go to arbitration. So generally, the union has followed.
The employer knuckles under.
The union has not cooperated with the employer in enforcing the proper standard of discipline in the workplace with regard to obeying safety rules.
I get the point. And that was why you said yesterday, according to the paper, that the union will invariably oppose the imposition of disciplinary actions, such as suspensions of firing, when a worker is careless on the job by neglect or just sheer carelessness.
That is correct.
True or false?
Jack, that's BS. There were 161,000 claims last year. Now, I agree that there may be some examples where a guy is doing something or a person is doing something that maybe they shouldn't be. But, you know, work is what causes accidents. If there was no work, we wouldn't have any accidents.
Yeah, but should a careless worker who shows that carelessness be fired or suspended on occasion?
That is such a minor point. It doesn't make sense.
It is not a minor point, Jack.
It's the I.W.A. It's the I.W.A. The union in Canada that first said, we have to have a full-time safety director. We're tired of our people being slaughtered on the side hills. It's the I.W.A. that hasn't been able to get companies for a hell of a long time to have an active, good safety program. The industry now, Jack, are better. That's why I say that I don't think that Don is speaking for the industry when he's saying that there is not cooperation. I am speaking for the industry
on that point, Jack, and you had better believe it. And I've checked very widely on this point, and it is a general problem. And I've got a list of these 12 arbitration cases involving Jack's own local unions, which he cannot deny. And that is only the tip of the iceberg.
Well, wouldn't you normally grieve it anyway? If any man is suspended for any reason, Jack, compensation or not, wouldn't you grieve it anyway?
In most cases, yes. The problem is usually the employer goes so damn far overboard on something like this.
All right. Hold your breath, gentlemen. Next, we're going to come to the question of the walking wounded. And we can refresh ourselves on the current statistics, which you will show use to show that the compensation board is better administered, and you will show that it's putting walking wounded back on the job. And you can make up your own mind after you hear Adam Little tomorrow and listen to these two spokesmen for the union and the council after this break. It's interesting. Jack Munro from the I.W.A, Don Lanskail from the Council of Forest Industries. And one of Munro's blunt attacks, to which he is often given, is the fact that under the current administration in the Compensation Board, post-Eisen, currently Adam Little, and a new social credit government, is that what you call, kind of extravagantly perhaps, walking wounded are being rushed back to work. Now, how can you, is there any way you can even partly substantiate that claim?
Jack, in our submission to the minister telling him what's wrong with the board, we have a table, and the table says that in 1975, the average days lost per claim was 49 days. 76, 36, 77, 36, and 78 down to 35. The business agents in our union are constantly before the boards of review arguing that our people should not be disqualified or their claims cut off until they are ready to go to work. We have medical doctors who have been treating the injured workers, saying that they are not ready to go to work. We go to the boards of review, we can get unanimous decisions from the boards of review, and the commissioners and the people running the board overturn unanimous decisions of the boards of review. And they say that due to overwhelming medical evidence, or whatever the heck the words are, that they have decided to disallow the continuation of the claim.
Your point is clear. You say 1975, there were 50 days off for each.
Right.
You're talking about your industry, forestry and sawmill in the main. Our members
Logging,
are,
right.
Logging.
Logging,
Just
right.
logging only.
Primarily, yes.
Primarily. 50 days off for an injury in logging, now down to 35.
Right.
And you suggest to Mr. Lanskail that this is a result of their pressuring the social credit government and the board to be tougher on men being off on the
Jack,
278
the story about walking wounded,
Okay.
I know this is a point that the union likes to dwell on and thump on many occasions. The policy which is prevalent in the industry and which is universal to the best of my knowledge is that no employee goes back to work until his own doctor says that it is proper for him to go back to work. Now, in some cases, the employee himself, and it is good therapy for him too, to take a lighter job. This is what Jack means by walking wounded. It means that a person who is injured can go back to perhaps a lesser a job which is less onerous on him. And this is good for him, good for his recovery, and it is not done, Jack, until the man's own doctor approves. So he has that protection of his own doctor's advice and also his own personal choice as well. And in most cases, it is good for him, and this is what he wants to do.
But
And the I.W.A. take the position, just a minute. Unfortunately, they take the position that under no circumstances should anybody go back to a job other than the one that he was originally on. In other words, light work is anathema to them. Now, why they have that policy, I don't know. But it is an unrealistic policy and not soundly based.
Jack,
Light work is
what is
anathema
light work?
to you.
That's,
Is it correct that you
that
don't want the
statement
man...
is BS. That's what that is.
Is it correct that you don't want the man back until he goes back to the job at which he was injured?
Jack, you know, we're talking about a heck of a lot of injuries in... What is a light job in the logging, the sawmill, or the plywood industry? Somebody tell me what a light job is.
Sweeping the floors.
There are very, very few light jobs, and there aren't very many people who just sweep floors.
Yeah.
It's a tough industry. It's hard work. You know, hauling cables around or If you're a cleanup man in a sawmill, you're climbing in and out of conveyors and around through junk and crap all over the place. There is no light work. Unless you're talking about laying on a floor, picking up sawdust with tweezers or something.
There may not be a great number of so-called light jobs, but there are some. And the key point, which Jack is unwilling to respond to apparently, is the fact that the man does not go back to work unless his doctor approves.
Is that right?
Well, Jack, if a doctor is treating a person, and it is happening now, the doctor says you are not able to return to work, and the WCB decide.
But is the
We're still, they don't establish a claim in the first place.
Is the claim paid? Is the time loss paid claim as long as the doctor says you're not fit to go to work?
It should be.
Sorry, what
Is
was
the
that?
time loss paid claim paid as long as the man's doctor says you can't go back to work?
I am not certain about that. I can't answer, so I'm going to be perfectly honest.
All right, let
I'm
me
not
give
sure,
you-
but I suspect it is.
Let me give
now,
you-
Now, I want to raise another point here. Jack, in his brief, and I have a copy of it here,
Right.
has indicated that boards of review, their decisions are being overturned, and that people are not getting claims which are legitimate, not getting them recognized and paid.
Right.
Now, I'd like to get some feeling from Jack about what percentage of claims are actually rejected in the final analysis by the board. Can he give me some ballpark figure, not necessarily the exact one?
No, I don't.
What would you think, the 7% or 8%?
I don't know. I wouldn't guess. I don't know.
5%?
I don't know.
4%?
Too many.
Jack, there are this year, the first 9 months of this year, there have been 1.4% of claims rejected.
In all,
And now we all know, human nature being what it is, that there are some people who tend to abuse the system. A minority, I'll concede that, because we respect our workforce, and the members of the I.W.A. are generally a darn good lot. But there's always, in any group, a small minority that abuse. Now, whether you can argue that it should be more than 2 or 3% or something of that kind, I don't know, but there's only 1.4% of claims rejected. Now, in Ontario and Alberta, the 2 points of comparison that I made before, there are 7% of the claims rejected in both provinces. Well, Alberta, I think 7.4%, Ontario 7.1 or whatever it is. Now there's the picture in British Columbia, 1.4% compared to 7% in these other provinces, and Jack is complaining about the system.
you think they're still too generous at
Well,
1.4%?
our concern, quite frankly, is that possibly too many unjustified claims are getting through. Some people tend to abuse the system. A minority, true enough, but there is a group that tend to abuse the system.
I don't pretend to be an expert on Alberta or Ontario. I have enough problem keeping up with the shenanigans in BC, and I can't keep up with all of them. If we're going to talk about another province, let's talk about Quebec, where the law in Quebec, René Lévesque's law, says that a worker who decides something is unsafe, he doesn't have to justify that to anybody. If it's unsafe, he doesn't do it. There's a WCB inspector comes in, the union, the inspector, and the management decide whether or not it's unsafe, whether or not the work should be performed, and no penalties, and it's in the law.
Don't we have that?
Exactly, Jack.
We do not
the
have
law,
that in British Columbia.
Look, I have some familiarity with the law. I've gone through a number of arbitrations in my other capacity a few years ago. And an employee does not have to perform an act which, in his honest view, is an unsafe act. And that's the law at the present time, and they're going to actually incorporate it in the new legislation, as I understand it. May already be there. But that is the common law as it is right now. No employee has to perform an act which he honestly believes is unsafe.
But it's not in the statute yet.
I'm not certain
what
what's
they
actually
say,
in the
Jack.
statute yet.
Gentlemen, there's a very important point I want to get at, and I'm merely here as a devil's advocate. You're complaining 50 days time lost in 75, 50 days off for an injury in 75 has been reduced to 35 days in 78, correct?
Right.
And that, to you, means they're going back to work too soon.
I know that our business agents are, before the boards of review, appealing these things.
Just a minute. That must, however, have been, and I say this in a kindly fashion, must have been one of the aims of your object. You felt that under the previous administration, the board was too generous in the time off given for accidents.
I would agree with that.
And
the key protection, Jack, is the fact that the employee does not have to go back until his family doctor says it is okay for him to go back. Now, naturally, we don't.
But what's happened to family doctors?
We don't want to see employees stay off longer than the reasonable circumstances require, and because of the high compensation levels, plus some tax anomalies, the amount is not taxable. Sometimes an employee can get more money, more net income by staying off the job than he would by going back on his regular wages again. Now, that is a problem. I'm not saying it's widespread, but that is one of the definite problems that we would like to see corrected.
If I can just finish my point, though, by this somewhat sharp cut in days lost on accidents from 50 to 35, the load of financial weight on the employer through the compensation board must have been sharply reduced since 75.
Well, just a minute now. I've got some figures in that, too.
Hold your breath and we'll do that after the break.
Okay,
That's a good point. I think it's a fair point that I'm trying to make. You're unhappy about the 35 days instead of 50. He's got to be happy because it saves a lot of money, and we're going to look at that and discuss it briefly after the break.
Just go easy for a bit. I don't know if they want something before we break up or what.
Number of fatalities is down, you know. The trend is down. I've got the figures there, too, and the trend is down. A few words from you.
Oh, testing my mic?
Well, you probably have the same figures I have.
Oh,
71,
hard.
52.
Okay.
In
What the hell? It doesn't work. Now is a goddamn. Now is a goddamn. Now is a goddamn.
Take your wire off here.
takes the place of 1, 2.
In case you just tuned in and wonder who's shouting at home,
I'm not shouting.
my name's Webster. That is Jack Munro of the I.W.A. This is Don Lanskail of the Council of Forest Industries. And we're having a public discussion on the effectiveness of the Workers' Compensation Board. And Munro's basic point is that since 1975, since social credit came in, they're whittling away at benefits obtained and services given by the board to workers. And the BC Fed wants Adam Little to resign. Adam Little's going to be on the program tomorrow morning. Don Lanskail admits quite freely that when the new government came in, they did go to them and say, hey, it's too sloppy. You've got to tighten up a bit. You're working with your eyes half shut, or what's that effect? My statement.
Yeah, the administration, not the level of benefits per se, but the administration, the whole
And you're
attitude
very proud
to
of the
cost.
$278 a week tax-free that a disabled worker gets under compensation.
It's the highest in North America, Jack, so we are proud of it.
But you are pleased with the fact that the days lost per accident from 50 to 35 is reducing the financial load on the companies.
We think that employees should go back to work when the medical circumstances make it reasonable for them to do so. And the family doctor makes the decision.
I understand that, but the point is that millions have been saved by the cutting down by the board from
Well, now,
50
Jack,
days
you
to
refer
35.
to millions being saved.
Am I right?
I want to tell you about the increase in the amount of dollars that the industry has paid for compensation, the forest industry now, between 74 and 78 in a 5-year period. Back in 1974, the dollar amount that was paid for compensation was about $31.5 million. By 1978, 5 years later, $64.5 million, well over double the amount. Now, Jack talks about the assessments not being increased. Well, the two variables that go into the computation of the amount of money that goes in for compensation is, first of all, the maximum earning level, the ceiling on earnings, and the assessment. And the legislation requires the ceilings to be adjusted first. And the ceilings have gone up between 1974, 10,400, up to 1978, 17,600, and it is now up to about, it's over 18,000.
You're not complaining about that. You're just complaining.
He did complain about it in his
Did
brief.
you, Jack?
In his brief.
I think we're missing the point, Jack, and statistics don't get me all excited. The fact is that we have more people in our industry getting hurt. We have more people in our industry getting killed. The first 6 months of 1979, the accident rate is up 18%. What we're saying is that the board is not doing its proper job. They are cutting back on services. We're saying, and in view of the statement last night in the paper, that obviously the workers and our union are not only fighting for proper administration of the WCB, but now we are fighting the employers. We say in our brief, and we asked Dr. Little in our brief, can he cite one instance since 1977 when he publicly criticized any section of BC industry on its occupational health records and circulated his comments to all MLAs? When Adam Little responded to our safety director's report to our convention, he circulated a 5-page letter to all MLAs in British Columbia, to some trade unionists, had a press conference, kicking the hell out of us, bordering on calling us liars when we were using his figures.
Said you were using false statistics.
We are now, since Don Lanskail's statements, obviously, the employers are trying to protect the WCB. And
Jack, that is absolutely
irresponsible.
wrong.
That's irresponsible.
We are saying that we want cooperation from the union with regard to the employer imposing reasonable safety rules and making them stick in the operation. We are not here today to defend the WCB. They can defend themselves. We are looking for cooperation from the union with regard to the matter of a disciplined workforce complying with safety regulations. And the record that I've cited to you, 12 arbitration cases where the union has fought, where a person is suspended after a series of warnings for safety infractions, and the union will not cooperate with the employer in doing that.
How many did the union win?
I think it was but 2 out of the 12.
You won most of them.
Which indicates that the company was correct in the action.
All right,
but we want cooperation from the union in imposing reasonable disciplinary action where there's an infraction of safety, because that's where most of the accidents
Maybe he
occur.
has a good point there, Jack.
No, he doesn't have a good point. I want to get away from this arbitration. We have people who have dedicated their life to this industry.
No wonder he wants to get away from it.
Running power saws, Jack.
Yeah.
People who are at home, they can't go to work because they're suffering from what they call white finger disease. The WCB, obviously with the support of the industry,
now that's not obvious at all.
Are saying that we are still studying it. In the meantime, you stay at home, you go on welfare, but we aren't going to pay you WCB benefits. The same thing with cedar dust asthma. A person who works in a sawmill all their life, who eventually can't go near the sawmill because of the cedar dust, has to stay at home because he can't breathe. And he is not entitled to WCB.
Jack,
are you involved in that at all, Don?
We have established here, as Jack knows, a committee between FIR, the Pulp Bureau, and COFI to conduct a research program into industrial health, hazardous chemicals, materials, and so on. The 3 senior unions in the industry have all been invited to serve on that committee. Jack has an invitation. He's still considering it. We had a meeting of our steering committee the other day. The leaders of both pulp unions were there. And we hope that Jack will be able to join that committee too, because the industry is serious and concerned about trying to do something about that area. But we need cooperation. And Jack, we're not getting it. Now look, I want to say one other thing too. There's a real need for cooperation between the union and the industry, and also with the board. It's a 3-way proposition. Now, Jack says he doesn't even know Adam Little. And here he is sounding off, criticizing Adam Little, and he has never sat down to talk to Adam Little. He doesn't even know him, I don't think. He admits he's never even met him. Now, surely this proves the point I'm making, that there's got to be more cooperation between the 3 parties to tackle this thing and not get into rhetoric. Safety should be something that we all agree on, particularly the prevention of accidents.
Yeah, okay, that point must be accepted as a kind of motherhood point. And
It's more than a motherhood point.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying, what about specifics like cedar dust asthma and the white-fingered syndrome? Would that be something for which you would lobby against as an additional compensation board expense?
We want to sit down and measure the problem and find out what the proper remedies are. And this is why we have set up this committee.
Why have you joined the committee?
Jack, because it's a sop against one of our demands in negotiations.
Well,
for the last 2 sets of negotiations, we have asked for 1 cent per hour from the industry that would fund a good program. We talked to UBC, they have the ability to get it started, and the industry, rather than agree with us and put 1 cent an hour into a fund, which is about $500,000 a year on the coast, to do a thing with equal representation, to do a study.
A research study.
Right. They propose a scheme and say, we will invite you to join us. We say, if you're that serious about it, why didn't you agree with our demand and give us our
Jack, as a matter of philosophy and policy, the industry does not feel that safety is a matter for a collective bargaining, the adversary atmosphere of the bargaining table. Now, you might comment on Jack's and my argument here this morning, but we are sincerely interested in sitting down to look at the common ground in this safety matter, and it is not a matter for collective bargaining. And that is why it is not in FIR. That is why it is in the Council of Forest Industries and not at FIR.
A most enlightening program, ladies and gentlemen, with Jack Munro of the I.W.A. and Don Lanskail of the Council of Forest Industries. And more of it, because if you're not a worker, you are a worker or will be a worker. And God willing, God hope you're not tangled up in compensation, but you may be after this break.
In fact, we're adjusted twice
it?
a year. Liberalization of the policy, staff.
Eight, 7.
I know that neither one of my guests wants to deal particularly with statistics, but sometimes you've got to go at the number of things that happen. And the point I want to raise with you gentlemen now is one which struck me in some things you've said. The number of inspections are down by thousands, you say. Now, Mr. Lanskail says they'll cut out a lot of duplicate first aid station inspections. Are you suggesting that the Compensation Board has stopped seriously inspecting logging, for instance, where your most tragic and miserable deaths take place? Are you suggesting that...
If we have to talk statistics, yes. When the...
Are you suggesting that there are fewer Compensation Board inspectors in the woods are looking at that frightening equipment in sawmills than there used to be?
I'm saying...
Have they cut the staff?
I'm saying that according to the WCB annual report, inspections are down. Accidents are up. In 74, 75, inspections were up and accidents were down. Those are facts out of the annual report.
We don't think there's any correlation between that, Jack.
Seems to make sense.
Well, I know, but I don't think... if you look at the number of fatalities, the trend is down as far as the logging industry is concerned. And I suspect that there should be a correlation between the number of real accidents as opposed to, the claims which formerly were rejected by the board because they were not work-related. And I suspect that the real number of accidents that you could categorize as real accidents is not going up. Now, the reason is that the board is much more liberal in recognizing claims. There's one example, not in our industry, where two construction employees going up to Dawson Creek for a job stopped at a beer parlor on the way up and ran their car off the road down near Hope somewhere, 500 miles away, and their claim was recognized. Now, claims of that kind, there's some real, this was about 3 or 4 years ago, and claims of that kind are not really work-related, and yet those kind of claims are being accepted more and more, and that is why I think the number of claims are going up.
You would like to see that kind of claim?
Well, we think it should be work-related. We think that if there is a social obligation, it should be the part of the public generally and not the industry. The industry should be responsible for work-related injuries and no others.
Jack, that's the kind of thing that will grab the ordinary viewer. He'll say, God save us all, a couple of guys in a beer parlor having finished work getting a compensation claim. Is that kind of thing
Jack,
common?
I'm not familiar with the details.
But you would agree that claims must be work-related?
Certainly they must be work-related. I don't, as I say, first of all, I don't profess to be an expert. I have a full-time safety director working for the regional council. We have safety directors, business agents in each local union who handle this. Now, I would sure as heck be prepared to have those people come if we want to talk about each and every instance and what the details were. I know that between 1960 and 1970, we're going to talk some statistics, there was an average of over 50 fatalities, 50 people killed per year in the logging industry. Between 74 and 76, under Ison, the average was reduced to 36 per year. Inspections were up, fatalities were down. Between 77 and 78, however, the average rate increased to 44 44. We're headed back to the 1960 era.
Well, that's not, well, those
But you have an answer for that.
those figures are simply not correct. The figures I have, and I have every reason to believe that they are correct.
They're out of the WCB's
71, they were 52, and in 1977, this is logging, 1977, 34, and 1978, 31. 31. And the average over the years is 41. Now, there was a reduction, true enough, in 1978, there were 28. But I do not think that is attributable to any change in WCB policy. I think it's a matter of better safety attention being paid. Now, what we're trying to do, Jack, just to give a little bit of a positive note here for a change, the industry is taking it very seriously, and we are looking at the figures every month, the statistics, and any company which goes below a certain level get a letter from me, the Chief Executive Officer. We are trying to get the top people in the industry deeply concerned about safety. Some of them are now. Some of them, as a matter of fact, even hold their supervisors directly responsible, and if they have a bad safety record, their salary increase is affected. And so we are trying to encourage this thing all through the industry, and we are serious, and that is why I want to again go back to the need for cooperation between the WCB, the industry, and the union.
Just a minute, this is a point in which you can both have at each other. Is the only area of non-cooperation, Mr. Munro and Mr. Lanskail, the fact that when an accident happens, that you fight among each other about who is to blame or who is to be suspended? And your claim is that the union will not cooperate in suspending negligent workers, and he says that you'll do whatever, but that's not their fault. Is that right?
That is the only real area where we feel there's a lack of cooperation with the union at the present time.
Do you cooperate in plants right now,
yes.
gentlemen?
There's a safety committee in every plant, and many of them are working very well, Jack. A safety committee with an equal number of union people and an equal number of management people. And those committees, in many cases, are working well. In some cases, unfortunately, no, because either through management lack of concern, or, just a minute now, or union militants using the safety committee for some unrelated purpose.
What about that, Jack?
Generally, they work well. I applaud those committees, but I want to, okay, let Jack have a word.
Union militants using safety committees for unrelated troublemaking purposes.
No, that's a bunch of BS. And Don has been removed from the industry for too long. Now he's the industry worldwide PR guy.
I had a session with FIR yesterday to bring myself up to date.
Well, who the hell said FIR know what's going on in the industry?
They know the scene.
There are all kinds of areas of cooperation. But in this, the facts are that a speech was made by Don Lanskail kicking the stuffings out of us and our members. That is not cooperation. If cooperation was turned around to the point where he would have made a speech and said, look, the industry agrees too many people are getting hurt, too many people are getting killed, and Dr. Little and your administration had better do something about it.
They don't know.
Yeah. Very difficult.
Apart from what we've learned, that there's a lack of some safety cooperation when it comes to suspending workers. The management suspends, the union grieves, and the safety thing gets lost sight of at times. Gentlemen, right. On the odd occasion. Nod your head, Jack? No, you won't.
We don't have the right to suspend management every time they break a rule.
Well, that's an irrelevant red herring, Jack.
Makes the point.
It does make a good polemic, demagogic point, but it is irrelevant. I do support Mr. Lanskail on that. But the important thing here, what we've learned this morning, is that in '75, the employers in the main were concerned about what they felt was an easing up in the granting of claims and too rate an expenditure of money and all the things of which Jack Munro was very proud of from the NDP government. And these included, come on, give me them again. I've lost my list.
adjustment on the cost price indexing as far as pensions are concerned, liberalization of the claims policy, increased the resource staff in accident prevention, industrial hygiene, the establishment of the external boards of review.
And no interferences you now allege takes place with the boards of review.
I don't allege, Jack. It happens every day.
You claim that.
It
Well,
does.
well, Jack, it doesn't happen every day. Jack
I mean,
still
you make
will-
the point that
Jack is trying to create the impression that there's a vast number of legitimate claims rejected. I have given the figure, which he has not rebutted, that only 1.4% of total claims are rejected. Now, that does not indicate a situation where legitimate claims are being rejected. We think that illegitimate claims are being accepted in some cases.
But in fact, you say that 98.6% of all claims are accepted for settlement and payment.
98.6. Right.
Some of them may be illegitimate, but
Yes.
that's the percentage.
Jack, what's happening right now, once again, the boards of review unanimously, after going through a person's file, after having that person in as a witness, listening to his testimony, making a decision, including the management officer, are saying unanimously that this claim should be allowed either to continue or to be established.
What percentage?
The chairman and the commissioner and the people who run the board have a standard form letter, and they're saying, and Dr. Little is a doctor, a medical doctor, are saying that the overwhelming evidence, medical evidence, has convinced the chairman and the commissioners to overturn and not implement the decision of the boards of
that
review.
is their jurisdiction. Now, I want to ask Jack, through you, Jack Webster, what percentage of claims should be paid? Should it be 100%? Anybody who makes a claim of any kind at all should automatically be granted? What should it be instead of 1.4% rejection?
That's a good question. Is the administration tough enough, Jack? And if I have a bad back, can I take a couple of days off and get compensation for it without medical examination?
No.
Well,
Jack,
I
and
suspect you can.
We don't support feather bedding, and we don't support any system that's in place to assist people in being ripped
You
off.
don't support fakery. Enough,
Right.
gentlemen. Enough. I'm going to try some phone calls. I don't know how they'll go, but one thing I must say before I take phone calls. We cannot discuss or assess your individual claim. If you've recently had a board of review overturned, that would be of some interest. Or if you think the compensation board is too generous, that would be of some interest. But please don't give me the history back to your back injury or your head injury in 1916. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yes, I'm a bus driver. I've been one for about 7 years. And the one and only experience I've ever had with the compensation board was about 2 years ago.
Was it good or bad?
It was bad. I pulled my back driving about the 12th of December. By the time I went in that afternoon to the compensation board, I was so doubled over they had to just about lift me onto the table to take x-rays.
Uh-huh.
So for about 6 days I was at home under my doctor's care, and I developed pneumonia on top of this and ended up in the hospital about the 20th of December.
And to cut a long story short...
To cut a long story short, the back problem, of course, was dropped at the moment I went into the hospital. I was in the hospital for about a week and a half, and when I got out, I was talking to the compensation board, who advised me that my claim had been accepted for my back. And during my period of recovery from my pneumonia, I was off work till about the middle of February when I went back.
Gee, I don't like calls.
However, the fact is that a month after this, they reviewed my claim, and the doctors at the compensation board decided that I should have been recovered within 6 days of my back injury, which was the day I happened to end up in the hospital. And so, having paid me in the first hand, I owed them back all this money.
How much did you have to give them back?
Well, we had our own medical plan at work, which paid 50%. They paid 85%, so I was out the percentage in between.
Yeah, well, sir, thanks for your story. You see why it's difficult to take compensation calls on the air? Because you don't like to be rude to people with long, complex details. Abbotsford, let's try Abbotsford.
Hello.
You're going to have to suffer through this with me, gentlemen. Go ahead, please.
I'll ask you this question, and then you can all listen to it. Now, they say you get $278 per week, but they don't pay that unless you work 3 months prior at least. And I've been working in the industry for 20 years prior. I went away for a while, come back, and I went to work for 6 days, and I got injured, and they only pay $278 every 2 weeks. I don't understand this. Could you explain? I'll hang up and you can explain it on the board.
Can't explain it, but it's a question I can put to Mr. Little in the morning. The 3-month qualifications for the continual compensation payment, unless you know the
Maybe
answer.
can answer that.
No, I don't.
No, I'll ask Mr. Little that tomorrow. Thank you very much. Victoria, go ahead, please.
Webster, I've got 2 points I'd like to make. First of all, I've had a confrontation with the Workmen's Compensation Board, and this is in the industry, in the forest industry here in Victoria. I worked for a company here in town, and just to bring out the very first point is that, first of all, one of our people has been injured in the sawmill industry.
Now, you got to come. Do you have a question you want to ask on the Compensation Board administration or on the industry or the union's attitude? That's really all I can cope with.
In the interest of the union.
Okay, ask the question.
Okay, the question is, what is the WCB and the forest industry going to do about their setting up their safety programs properly?
Okay. What have you not done that you should have done on safety programs, Mr. Munro?
Being tougher on the industry, Jack. We've been trying to set up effective programs for years.
Well, Jack Munro has admitted that he has never even met the chairman of the WCB. Now, that indicates a real lack of a structure at the industry level and the WCB level for a cooperative effort to tackle some of these problems. Now, we're prepared to sit down anytime with the board and Jack Munro and his safety people to talk about a realistic program.
Jack, I personally have not met him. These characters in industrial relations and governments and everything else keep me so damn busy, but I have all kinds of people who have met, who constantly meet with the board, working for me and working for local unions. The I.W.A. knows Adam Little very, very well. I don't personally know him.
As Chief Executive Officer of the union.
Right.
Is that? No, that's his title.
That's
You're the
his
president.
title.
He's a boss.
I'm the worker, he's the boss.
That's right. You're the worker president, and he's a boss president. Go ahead from Revelstoke.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have several questions, and I'd like to
Keep
ask,
them in the area of questions.
as far as for Mr. Lanskail's organization putting pressure on WCB to tighten up their cost expenditures. There are many doctors who treat people who have been hurt and put them in a position where they will turn around and say, look, you should be off longer, but the people would like to see you back at work. And even though you've been hit by a tree that was a leaner and have severely injured a leg, for example, and suffered a skull fracture, you're told to lace your boot tighter. You're told by people from WCB, when you phone to verify this, that it's all right to go back to work, you're not jeopardizing your claim. You're told that it's quite all right to go to work under heavy medication. By heavy medication, I mean 2,000 units of Robaxin, which is a muscle relaxant, and an analgesic by the name of Percodan. You then end up by getting clobbered on top of the head and back area with the broken part of a snag that leaves before the tree leaves the butt.
Look, you're obviously telling us your personal experience, and I'm impressed by them. He's saying that under the present administration, I spoke to this guy off the air yesterday, he had to go back to what...
The WCB treated me very well. I went for a medical review. They accepted everything. They even made arrangements for me to see a different doctor. All right? Now, I have to give them that. But at the same time, a point I'd like to see, Mr. Lanskail is crying about the amount of the assessment that is paid by industry. I would like to point out that while a person is waiting for acceptance of his claim in this province, and if they have no funds, they can go to the Ministry of Human Resources. The Ministry of Human Resources gives them an emergency slip to go down to the drugstore and get their prescription. But the ministry is never repaid by the Workers' Compensation Board. Now, why should all the taxpayers in the province pay for a job-related accident and for the medication required by the workman while awaiting the adjudication of his claim?
That's an intricate but interesting point.
I'm not familiar with that particular situation, Jack. On the one point, though, that the person makes, saying that the doctors pressure people to go back, I think that was the point that he was trying to make. I don't think the medical profession generally would do that. There may be isolated examples of doctors doing that, but I don't think that is a fair indictment of the medical profession as a whole.
Presuming this man is telling me the truth, and I'm sure he is, it wouldn't seem to be right that he goes back while, after a compensatable injury, under the influence of Percodan and 2,000 units of Robaxin, and has another accident. That's the kind of thing you're worried about.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it though. We can't make a judgment on it. Gentlemen, I'm going to let you go just after I have a final nag with you. Adam Little tomorrow morning, and I shall put to Mr. Little some of the material I've learned from Mr. Lanskail, and I shall put to him some of the material I've learned from your brief. And we'll see what we can do to, because I'm sure underlying all your problems, shouting and screaming, is a desire to cooperate, providing they cooperate fairly, give you a cent an hour. If they give you a cent an hour next year for research, you'll willingly cooperate in such a committee. Is that correct?
Jack, we don't think that safety is a collective bargaining issue. We think it's a matter of cooperation.
You do, though, don't you, Jack?
I think it's a collective bargaining issue.
Safety is a collective bargaining issue.
That's where the only way we can extract money out of these characters is at the collective bargaining table.
This program, the industry is putting on $150,000 a year into this industrial research program that Jack has been invited to participate in at no cost to him at all.
I won't go.
Well, no, I didn't. I know. We hope he will go.
I have
seriously.
an executive board meeting
But
today,
seriously,
and my recommendation is that now negotiations are over, that I participate in the program.
Yeah.
You are going to participate in the program.
I'm delighted to hear that.
In spite of the fact that we still think it was a sop in negotiations.
Well, it's not. It's not a sop.
Gentlemen,
Okay.
an illuminating program. Grateful for your presence. Do remove your microphones before you go.
Okay.
Webster on his own between now and 10:30. I think I may have a chat with Brian about Dr. Bareni after the break. Don.
They're on a permanent basis?
2229 Kings. Don, thank you very much. Thanks again, Jack.
Isaac.
4, 4, and 30.
How did that go?
Oh, God, yes.
15.
Boy, Brian, did you start something with that simple little report on the compensation board activities in the field and logging and sawmill? Did you see the program this morning?
Yeah, it was quite good.
Yeah, that really.
Two of them together for the first time.
Yeah, for the first time and in a public debate, and we got a couple of real key things out of Lanskail and out of Munro. And just as he left there just now, although he's refused up to now, he indicated that he is going to recommend to his executive board that they join this 150,000 research program on specific safety problems. I think it's white finger and cedar dust.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a morning.
So maybe it produced some sort of cooperation out of that.
I know. They're both tough guys, but tomorrow I had a little. Listen, what time did you get Dr. Joachim? How do you pronounce his first name?
Joachim Berhana.
Joachim Barhena.
Yeah.
Head of radiology. Didn't we have him on a program? Didn't you have him in a program on Webster last year?
Yeah, we did a story about a new device that had been installed in his radiology department, what they call a body scanner, where they put your body
that was
through.
where the woman was pushed through the big white circular thing and they examined the inside of your body.
Yeah, it gave you a cross-sectional look at the entire body.
Little did you dream at that time that you were interviewing a man who would be summoned as the world's expert on the removal of gallstones from the body of the Shah of Persia.
And I guess he didn't realize that at the time either.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
Although it's his procedure, he's done 800 of them.
About 800, so I guess it's quite simple for him, you know.
Quite, yeah, if you've done 800 of them.
Yeah.
Like I've done more than 800 talk shows, so they're quite simple for me. But I couldn't deal with gallstones, I'll tell you that. I was going to ask you something else. What time did the doctor get in last night? Late?
About 10:30, and it was a very, for security reasons, everything was kept very quiet. Few people knew when he was coming in, of course, but nobody was saying, so it was kind of a process of elimination. This flight originated in New York. Would he be on this one? Wasn't on that one, so finally, eventually, he came in at 10:30.
So you did the old Snoop cockscrow business?
Stand around the corner and watch.
Stand around the corner and wait to see who turns up at the airport. Well, it was a good piece anyway. It's always a compensation piece. Tomorrow, Adam Little. Thanks, Brian. Webster after the break. Eh?
3 minutes, 40 seconds coming out of this,
I'll deal with them now.
and then 3 minutes, 40 in this segment. And then we got 30 seconds to chat.
I don't play concertina. That's not an instrument.
It's one of my tribal instruments.
I play with you.
Instrument.
Is that
Yeah, that. Somebody trying to tell me the bagpipes came from India. I believe it to be true. I'm just winding down. 3 minutes and 40 seconds to fill with you. Go ahead, please.
Pardon?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yes, I'm going back to the compensation board.
Yeah.
I'm a wife of a logger that was hurt 2 years ago, and he's still in the hospital. And the compensation board, all they've slapped to me is 75% of his wages then. And there's nothing else being done about it. They tell me I can't sue, and it was negligence of a defected switch that caused the accident.
Well, that's why we have compensation, is to avoid a worker suing and losing. Now, is he getting his 278 a week?
Pardon?
Is he getting 278 a week?
Yes, he is.
Is there any COLA on that? Does it come up with the cost of living?
No, we can't meet the requirements on it.
How old is your husband?
Pardon?
How old is he?
He'll be 29 next month.
How long's he been in hospital?
2 years. He was in a coma for 6 months, 2 brain operations.
What are his chances of total recovery?
He may never ever talk again. He can't walk. He's a cripple completely down the left side and partially on the right hand. He's in the Holy Family Rehabilitation Center here in Vancouver.
And he's a member of the I.W.A.?
Yes, he has been for 11 years, a logger.
And the I.W.A. are looking after his claim on your behalf, I hope?
Just the compensation board, and like I say, they're only paying 75% of his wages that were 2 years ago. Now, why can't they pay 75% of his wages up to date?
I'll ask the chairman of the board about that tomorrow morning.
Yes, see, he would be getting $11.82 today if he was working. And also, due to that accident, he was in a safety meeting 2 hours before that. He was out in the landing exactly 15 minutes, and he got it just to get a few logs out of a ravine when he wanted to put up a new setting, and they wouldn't let him.
I hope the union, your business agent in your local union is making sure that he's being properly represented at all these things.
And, well, and the compensation checks sometimes are 4 and 5 days late. I get hassled by my landlord, and I just don't think they pay enough for a family of 4.
Listen, will you give your name and number to Linda, and I'll pass it on to Jack Munro's office to make sure that you're getting the service from the I.W.A. business agent or the compensation officer that you should be getting from the union, in case you're not, eh? You give your name and number to Linda, and we'll give Jack Munro's secretary a call and tell her he might have somebody look at your particular case to see if you're getting all you should be getting under the regulations. I hope your husband does make a
Well, they've given up on the speech problem so far. Right now, he's in a cast from the hip down to the ankle.
Ma'am, I'm glad you called, because that brings home to roost the actual dangers of the logging industry in British Columbia. Now, hold on, and Linda's going to take your name and number just to pass it on to be on the safe side.
Okay.
Don't go away. Webster after the break.
Down, yeah.
Lanskail was good too.
Yeah.
I think your microphone's on the wrong side of your doing. Put it on the other side, love, so it can be heard.
Isn't that better?
Leave it higher.
Rubbing now, right?
Hi, Ron. probably sound like a
Have you got
guy.
anything for tomorrow?
Adam Little.
Oh, and then a light piece with Art Cameron.
1 minute. 26 seconds.
Brian's quite bright, you know.
Pardon?
Quite bright. Crippled, but otherwise quite bright.
Old.
How old are you, 45, 46? Well, what are you? What are you, 40?
35.
That's the beard, of course. It makes you look ancient. Does, you know,
Michelle
beard.
says I have permission to stick my tongue out.
No, beards make people look old. Look at me with a beard. I look 114 up there. Well, Linda, we know what we're going to do tomorrow morning, don't we?
Right. Dr. Adam Little, chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board.
That should be an interesting program. If we have time tomorrow, too, we may have a shot from Christine. What's his name?
Harvey?
The Pipe in Victoria.
Yes.
And we're editing today a little 5 or 6 minute piece of my old friend Art Cameron,
Right.
Bob Hope's buddy, who retired from the Hotel Vancouver last night, one of the living legends in this town. Good friend of mine for 30-odd years. Mind you, he's much older than I am. And that'll be tomorrow morning with Adam Little, chairman of the Workers Board at 9 a.m. precisely. Thank you, Linda.